Peter Costello once referred to Tony Abbott as a Don Quixote, ready to take on lost causes and fight for great principles. Well, that metaphor has become more literal in the past week. Don Quixote was famous for tilting at windmills after mistaking them for giants. Now Tony Abbott is taking the sword to the wind power industry.
What we did recently in the Senate was reduce, Alan, reduce, capital R-E-D-U-C-E. We reduce the number of these things that we are going to get in the future. Now, I would frankly have liked to have reduced the number a lot more. I do take your point about the potential health impact of these things. When I've been up close to these wind farms, there's no doubt not only are they visually awful, but they make a lot of noise.
And now the government is proposing the creation of a wind farm commissioner to handle complaints about turbine noise and the alleged health impacts. The initial reaction on social media was sceptical. The hashtag #AllTheCommissioners started trending, with some declaring there should also be a commissioner for issues like overtaking on the inside lane and people walking slowly side by side on crowded footpaths. Wind farm advocates suggested the PM should appoint a coal commissioner.
We don't have evidence of alien abduction. Should we be spending public funds looking into it? No, we shouldn't. Is there a credible, plausible mechanism through which wind farms might adversely impact on people's health in the way that some of these extreme views might indicate? No, there's not.
But the government insists the alleged health problems of wind turbines and infrasound are a major concern and need to be taken seriously. Well, someone who has also had concerns is the Liberal Democrat Senator David Leyonhjelm. He set up the Senate Select Committee on Wind Turbines and has consulted widely with rural residents in affected areas. He's with me in Sydney tonight, and we're also joined by Kelly O'Shannessy in our Melbourne studio. She's the Chief Executive of the Australian Conservation Foundation and a strong supporter of wind power. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
Now, David, why do we need a wind farm commissioner?
Basically, it's a failure of governance. In Victoria, for example, we've got the state government approving wind turbines and then handing over compliance, sticking with the rules, to the local government bodies, the councils. They're small rural councils, they're not equipped. It's a highly sophisticated industry, major multinational companies with dealing with an area that's not scientifically well sorted out. They have no expertise in acoustics. People who are getting sick, who are in proximity to these wind turbines, are being treated really badly, ignored, discounted, told there's something wrong with their heads. Something needs to be done.
All right, Kelly, is that a fair argument to have a wind farm commissioner?
Well, no, it's not, because there's been no less than 8 studies done by the federal government in the last 5 years on whether wind farms cause ill health, and every single study has found that there is no evidence of that so far. I will say that there is a lot of evidence showing that coal does cause ill health, and I think the people at the start of the pack there were right. We don't need commissioners for everything that could possibly annoy us or go wrong. I don't want to belittle the argument here, but there is no evidence that ill health exists, and in various states and territories, there are Environment Protection Authorities and Department of Health and Department of Environment that people can go to make complaints about noise and about any other ill health that they feel from wind farms.
All right, now David, you're a proponent of small government and the need to be meticulous about how we spend taxpayers' money. So that we know whether this would be good value for money, can you tell us how many people are complaining about the health impact of wind turbines in Australia every year?
I don't know. I don't know. All I know is there is a lot of them. They have a very consistent story. We've heard from people who've welcomed wind farms into their area, sometimes welcomed them onto their farm, and they're very happy to be part of the renewable energy sector. When the turbine starts up, or the turbines, there's usually dozens, if not hundreds of them, they get sick. They move away from the area for a time, they get better. They move back again, they get sick again. And when Kelly says there's no evidence, there is an absolute mass of anecdotal evidence. It's the strict, by-the-book, peer-reviewed scientific evidence. Nobody says that that's present.
OK, but you've sat on committees looking at this issue. If you don't know how many people are making complaints, how do you know if we actually need a commissioner or not?
Because they are so consistent, and because they're not being addressed. This has been going on for a decade. in fact probably longer than a decade, really probably more like 2 decades. It's been going on, been getting ignored, the complaints keep occurring, new wind farms get established, new series of complaints occur around the wind farms. It's just such a predictable outcome. Now with the new RET, we're going to have anything up to 2,000 more turbines established. They'll be the big ones, the 3 megawatt and above. The evidence suggests that they are the ones most likely to cause people around them to become ill. It's a concern. Okay. I don't think we should be causing harm.
Okay, I'll get Kelly to respond to that. Kelly, if we have a commissioner, could it actually be good for industry? Because if what you're saying is true about the safety record of wind turbines, you know, would it be good to have scrutiny and to put those claims to rest?
Well, I think what we're saying is there is incredible scrutiny already. There's processes where people can make complaints. And I do have an answer to your question, Steve. There was a study done by the University of Sydney of complaints on wind farms received from the existence of wind farms in Australia up until the end of 2012. So there's a couple of years missing. But there was 129 complaints made and analysed in that study. And what they found is that 90% of those complaints occurred after anti-wind farm activists had gone into those local areas. So where anti-wind farm activists aren't present, there are few complaints. And so one of the findings of this is the nocebo effect, that actually it's the anti-wind farm activists that are making people sicker than the actual wind farms themselves, which there's no evidence of ill health coming from wind farms.
So David, if there was only 120 up to 2012 and 90% of them, according to Kelly, came after activists were in the area, does that mean that there's no value for taxpayers in having a commissioner here?
I presume Kelly is talking about Simon Chapman's study, which is rejected out of hand by a lot of other people involved in the industry. Look, the issue is this. If the wind industry has got nothing to hide, why won't they release their operating activities, their hours, their wind speed, their own noise measurement data? Why won't they release it? The first time it's ever happened was when Pacific Hydro, to their credit, released their operating activities. It was compared to people getting sick and a correlation was found. Now I concede correlation is not causation. Yep. The hard science is not in, but the anecdotal evidence is compelling and we cannot tell people you are not sick when they are sick.
Okay, David, you talk about the evidence, the National Health and Medical Research Council concluded in February this year that there is currently no consistent evidence that wind farms cause adverse health effects in humans. That's evidence, isn't it?
No, we heard from the NHMRC today in a hearing in Canberra. They have in fact commissioned additional work. They conceded additional work is required.
But they're still saying there's no evidence.
That's right. It's scientific evidence. What they looked for was the peer-reviewed double-blind study that's the gold standard. They looked for that, and that doesn't exist. And I'm not pretending it does exist. They discounted the hundreds of anecdotal stories in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada, in the UK, Germany, and other places like that. There is a lot of that. But yes, the gold standard doesn't exist at the moment.
All right, Kelly, I'll get your reaction to that because the National Health and Medical Research Council has called for further research, haven't they? Do you agree that further investigation is warranted?
Well, I think that's the reason why we're saying we don't actually need a wind farm commissioner, because this evidence, this information is being sought again. This is the most overstudied form of producing energy in the country, perhaps even in the world. And what I really congratulate the Senate for wanting to look after the health of Australians. I'm totally supportive of that. But if we're serious and genuine about that, we'd be looking to coal, we'd be looking at the Hazelwood mine fire. Anecdotal evidence, I was standing with a fella that lives 400 metres from that mine when it was on fire. He couldn't breathe, his kids couldn't breathe. 19 times the standard was exceeded. That is dangerous.
All right. So, David, why not have an energy commissioner and someone who looks in coal seam gas, someone who looks into wind turbines, someone who looks into coal?
Well, that argument's based on the proposition if you can't solve all the problems, don't try and solve any of them, or don't try and solve this one. So
it's based on solving the biggest problem, I think, Senator, is what we're saying.
Okay, but I'm not saying that the problems with the Hazelwood fire weren't significant. I'm not saying coal mines don't cause problems. But there is a problem here. It is not to be discounted. The NHMRC has said it's worthy of investigation. In due course, I think that the big wind companies will be found to be negligent. In the beginning, thalidomide did not have a peer-reviewed double-blind study proving it caused deformities in people. There was only anecdotal evidence in the beginning. Over time, the gold standard was met. Same with asbestosis, same with a series of things.
Kelly, are you seeing parallels here between asbestosis, thalidomide and wind farms?
Well, I do see some evidence around the tobacco industry because, and I know that the Senator had mentioned that in previous comments, because the tobacco industry spent a lot of money trying to put out disinformation around tobacco and in health many decades ago, and we're seeing exactly the same thing around coal. And I would question where the funding of these anti-wind farm lobby groups are coming from, but we do know coal is dangerous, climate change is dangerous, and if we are going to solve that problem, we need renewable energy, and wind is a big part of that.
David, you said today that wind farm companies are terrible neighbours. What's the evidence of that?
Oh, we have heard so much evidence of that. They won't release their data. That's number one. That's probably the single biggest.
Is that commercial in confidence?
No, it's not. All it is when are you running your turbines? What's your noise emission, your own noise emission data? That sort of stuff is crucial to assessing whether they're causing any harm. On top of that, they're highly litigious. They're really obnoxious to their neighbours. They're threatening to sue them. They put gag clauses in their contracts. They're dreadful neighbours.
All right, Kelly, I'll get your response to that. Are they dreadful neighbours, and are they negligent for not even releasing the data?
Well, as I said earlier, this is the most overstudied industry. The data has been released, it is available, it has been studied, and there is no evidence connecting it to ill health. I know these people as well. They're regular business people, and there's many people that live in the country that are next to these wind farms, that have wind farms on their property, that are very supportive. Some of them were speaking up in the press in the last few days. So I think we should look at the evidence here and not put ideological claims. We need to look at I agree with the Senator, peer-reviewed evidence, and that is the work that has been done to date.
David, what qualifications should a commissioner have, and how should they be chosen? For example, should the PM be able to choose the commissioner, given that he has criticised the industry publicly?
That's a good question. I think somebody who knows how to go and find expert evidence and take expert advice, who doesn't discount what is good anecdotal evidence, who knows how to understand perhaps scientific evidence and distinguish between what is scientific and what's not scientific. Can I just also respond to Kelly's points earlier? We are not talking about renewable energy being bad. We're talking about one form of renewable energy having a problem which they won't face up to. I've got no disagreements about large-scale solar, for example. That you can live next door to one of those.
I want to come back to Kelly. Kelly, if we're going to have a commissioner, who should it be? What should their qualifications be? Who should choose it?
Well, I don't think we should have one. I don't know where their qualifications should be, because there is already opportunity for people to complain. The scientists have already looked at the data. So if it is someone such as the Senator who is good at finding evidence and information, I think that already exists with the National Health and Medical Research Council. The expert body in this country has already done a number of reviews. So I think it is a total waste of taxpayers' money, and it will delay the deployment of renewable energy in this country. And if you like renewable energy, you have to like wind farms, because they're they're the most fastest growing renewable energy on the planet.
All right. We've run out of time. Thanks to you both for coming in.
Thank you.
Welcome.